Welcome, and thank you for joining us for another edition of Live by Heart Today. Our show begins now.
Streaming from Retro Earth Studio and brought to you by
We Are Historically Conscious Brand Apparel. It's time for the next episode of Live by Heart
Today
with your hosts, Dawn Spiegelberg and Wendy R. Wolf.
Hello and welcome to the Live by Heart Today show number 23. This is a show designed to help you navigate change, navigate uncertainty, and the new world we found ourselves in. We'll talk a little bit about science, a little bit about how our bodies work, a little bit about intuition, and we'll talk a lot about transformation. Today's theme is choosing your goal. And with me for today's Heart to Heart is my co-host, Wendy R. Wolf, Professional Transformation Facilitator. Hi, Wendy.
Hey, Dawn. It's pretty exciting to be focusing on this. The way I've been thinking about it in the last little bit is, what's your pot of gold? It's a wonderful way to introduce this topic. And I just want to say that we've had the last many talks have been around playing our own game and owning our own story on the sub-theme of owning our authority, which is the theme of in relationship. So in relationship, how do we play our own game? And so what are our goals? So what do you have to say about that, Dawn?
I have a lot to say about that, actually. And when you talk about your pot of gold, let's just mention that it's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, right? And
yes,
it's that exciting thing. It's that place that you're in search of, that is there, that you're working toward. Some people refer to it as purpose. And I know there are lots of people in the world who don't think they know their purpose. They don't think they're following their purpose. They're in their 50s and 60s and still looking for their purpose. And even at one point, I was talking with a whole group of people, and one woman said, "Thanks for pointing out I don't have a purpose." And it was really heartbreaking, because I was mentioning that as the world is changing, that we can make contributions in lots of different ways now where we weren't necessarily exposed to them. People started sewing their own face masks, and people started delivering groceries to their neighbors, and they created these intricate maps, and you just write down what you need and somebody is able to get those things for you. So lots of opportunities to give back and to contribute. And this person just said, "I don't know what my contribution is yet," right? So people are still struggling with knowing what their goals are, knowing what their journey is. So I think it comes at perfect timing that we're discussing what our goals can be, how to know what our goal is, choosing where to go. There's so many paths to take.
Mm-hmm.
You've mentioned holding the space for freedom. So for you, freedom is so important. Mm-hmm. And I see when you talk about freedom, how there are other people without that freedom, restricted in finding their purpose, right? Because they feel like they have to go one way, which is different than keeping your eyes on your own paper and being the driver of your own car,
yes.
Right?
Yes.
There's a really good distinction. I think we should talk about that.
Yeah, and the same vibration for me, the same thing as freedom as I see it from my soul, I call permission, which really gives a lot of information to me about it. It's like, can my permission come from within? Can my permission come from my relationship with earth and heaven, and not from out there? And also that really helps me with choosing my goals or noticing what my goals are, it's like, for me, they've morphed. They stay in the same general range, but how I talk about them changes, how I understand them iterates. And so can we give ourselves that freedom, that permission to be like, this is how far my flashlight sees right now. That's good enough. I can go.
And you get to choose where to shine your flashlight.
Get to choose where to shine your flashlight.
That's important, an important distinction.
Yeah. And speaking of which, this whole thing, of course, reminds me of Jesus. And he said something that was so useful, I feel like, about focus. I mean, because what we're talking about is focus. And he said, when the eye is single or simple, it's a translation issue. When the eye is single, the body is full of light. When we allow ourselves to come to a point, if you take all of your energy, all the time you have, or all the money you have, and you put it in one direction, you're going to get somewhere. If we're going to get nowhere.
Yes. So scientifically, this is the laser, right? They're capturing photons and directing them all in one place, one singular focus. And that's powerful, right? It cuts through hindrances and hurdles and anything in the way. So that's a powerful image. So Christ talked about lasers thousands of years ago.
Yes, and he said something else so powerful that goes with this, I feel like, which is the whole ask and receive, seek and find, knock and it's opened. And it's like, where do we? Well, it's right here. If we keep asking right here, we will get it. If we ask in all directions, so our choice is really important here, I believe.
Let's take a moment and talk about how we choose. So you've mentioned before the distinctions between mission and vision. And I think you mentioning that right now will help people understand how they make the choice. How do they know what direction to focus their light, to become laser focused?
Yeah, a month or two ago, about 2 months ago, I was doing some research because I was like, I need to write for business. I need to write a mission statement and a vision statement. And I'm like, I never could get the difference. And I'd read them and I'd be like, So I spent several hours and I did research and I read like all this stuff. Internet is great. And I read all this stuff. And then I found one thing that helped me make so much more sense of it. It was this great training, by the way. This person had amazing training online. Sometimes people give away so much wonderful information. And they made the distinction between our mission is from where we are now, how can we serve? And then our vision up here is where we ultimately want to be providing, what we want to see in the world, like ultimately from our offerings. And what does that look like to be offering? What does it look like?
So I'm going to jump in and mention what you just described. We discussed briefly with regard to the flashlight. So the mission is where your light is shining now, right? It's what you can see right now. And the vision is, are you looking at the ceiling? Are you looking at the floor? Are you, looking down the basement stairs? That's amazing. And it's an important distinction because we can't see beyond the light of our flashlight, but we get to decide which direction to shine that light in. So our mission is what we can currently see. And I love that you added where we can serve, because it may not be clear for people, right? In my own home, I have children. And so if it's lunchtime, I know where I can be of service. And if it's morning, I don't have to dress my kids, right? So I don't, and it's changed over the years, and that's a part of independence and authority and the shifts that children make, right? But if I were still trying to show my children how to dress themselves, that would be way out of synchronization with a natural progression.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I want to mention, I'm choosing lunch, right? I know I can serve, and I can either help them with lunch or make lunch. But what's the ultimate goal? The ultimate goal is to not make lunch for them for the rest of their lives. So the goal is to teach them how they can make their own lunch, to teach them where to go in the cupboard for the bread or the crackers, where to go in the refrigerator to find the meats and the olives. And that's an important distinction, because right now I'm shining my flashlight on. It's today, it's lunchtime, and my children need to eat. But that's not my vision for them.
Yes.
And you can see how so many women who are mothers, they miss that piece. And then when the children are gone, they don't have their own identity any longer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's this incremental in all our relationships, and that's what we're talking about overarchingly right now. In all our relationships, I hope that we are in constant evolution. We're in constant incremental shift, so everyone can become who we really are. Everyone can come to our fruition, and so it takes something. And it's so interesting, Dawn. I was just reading this article about, I forget, I think his name is Winnicott, is a psychologist, child psychologist. And he writes about how important it is to have a good enough mother. You don't want to be too good a mother according to perfect pictures. Like right at first you do. Right at first, all the needs, it's optimal right in the very beginning to have the needs of the baby be met.
Right.
But very soon, the baby has to start to realize that that baby physically is not you, the mother, and then eventually the baby is not you emotionally, the mother, not physically and then emotionally. And what helps the baby with that is these minor little incremental, not meeting their needs immediately. Letting them have that, just a little discomfort, and then meeting the need and little discomfort. And so and it just keeps going. I mean, he's talking about babies, but it just keeps going. At a certain point, you're just like, all right, everything to make your sandwich is on the counter.
Right.
And then at a certain point, you're like, you know where the peanut butter is.
Yeah.
And then at a certain point, you're like, make sure you clean up those plates after. And then at a certain point, you're like, here are the keys, go to the store and get food.
Yes.
And it's just this incremental, and it's like not being a perfect mother anymore, according to some ideal pattern, but it is a beautiful picture of being the best mother, because we're allowing the fruition of your children. So
this is a beautiful example, and I want to mention that the way in which those moments that are a little uncomfortable for the children, right, and whether they're infants or whether they're adults, those moments actually are naturally occurring when a parent is pursuing taking care of themselves. Yes. I recall wanting to make sure when my children were infants, super young, right, within the first 3 months, wanting to ensure my teeth were flossed and brushed at night before I went to bed. And somehow that was a big deal, right? There was always a little something. Oh, the baby's crying. Oh, the baby fell asleep and I'm in bed and I'm exhausted and I'm asleep too, right? But as parents pursue their own needs, it becomes a natural thing for children to also become independent. So you don't have to plan, how am I going to make it slightly uncomfortable for my child today so they're independent? And it's the planners the ones who are planning for the discomfort of their children, that's when things really get effed up.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a natural thing.
Right.
It's a natural thing. And then what's unnatural is if we're too perfect picture-y about it, or too enmeshed, or like our whole life is the child.
Yes.
And unfortunately, what happens is that cannot stand for the whole life of the child. So then there comes a break, and it's like, it's not incremental. And that is devastating and abandoning, and it's very uncomfortable. So like, we don't want that. So we know we want them to be independent and come to their own fruition. So can we allow ourselves to be us and get that what they need more and more? And I feel like this is then eventually, as people, as adults, we are reparenting ourselves. And so can we give our more freedom and permission and push the edges and be a little uncomfortable each day? And that, goes along with this theme. It's like, okay, well, I don't really know exactly what the goal is, but I know it's over in this direction, or I know it's not over here.
Yes.
And like, can I just allow that discomfort and head in this direction? So I just did a lot of things, but
and I want to point out something about the break that you mentioned. You were talking about children, right? And then eventually there's a break that happens. And in our society, there aren't necessarily clear rites of passage, right? Where the children clearly break from their parents and then become adults. And, there are sort of subtle ones like, oh, they start driving a car. That is a level of independence. Oh, they might go off to college. That's a level of independence. But I see a lot of children who can drive cars and who've been off to college still dependent on their parents. There hasn't been a clean break. And in one relationship, a client of mine was talking about a daughter who just got so upset about something that they had done and said, I'm not talking to you or my other parent ever again, right? So then it became an obvious break. Like in that moment, that person was deciding to become an adult.
Yes.
And it was uncomfortable for the parents. It was not easy.
Yes.
But you can see how necessary it was. Mm-hmm. And in that moment, parents needing to be understanding and forgiving and not take it personally, and know that it's a natural progression of children becoming adults.
Yes. Yes. And we see it when they're in their what's it called? When they're toddlers. Mm-hmm. They're practicing all this autonomy, and the same thing happens in the teens, practicing autonomy. And if it's not finished, then we see it in the 20s. Hopefully they're, right out of college. We hopefully see it, but I've worked with a lot of people. It's like, oh, all right, we're going to do some apron string cutting here, with people, people who are almost retired. It's just like people whose parents are gone, passed over. It's like there's still these little strings, and that's part of our reparenting to like be like, all right, let me clean this out and roll from my own center.
That's a beautiful example. Cutting the apron strings. It's a beautiful example of how people aren't seeing what their purpose is because they're still attached to some idea of who they were before or who they were expected to be from their parents. That's an interesting insight.
Yeah. Yeah. And I see, like, I am a big fan. There's this wonderful thing from Nietzsche. And he calls it the 3 transformations. And he says that first we're the camel and we say, pile me up. And if anybody wants this whole thing, if you don't find it, just contact us and we'll get it to you. First, pile me up on the camel. And once the camel's piled up, then it runs into the desert. Apparently camels like to do this. They run in the desert and the camel becomes a lion. And the bigger, the more stuff the camel had, the bigger the lion. And the lion's job is to kill the dragon of thou shalt. And so it's our parents but also our schooling and our society and our religion and our everything. And every scale of the dragon is a thou shalt.
Mm.
And our job is to kill the thou shalts. I mean, it got us this far. Thank you very much. All this programming, all this information, all this how you should do it. It got us this far, but then it can't get us to the next thing. So that all has to go. And a lot of people aren't enrolled in this. But anyway, as we grow up, we kill the dragon, and then eventually we come into the place where we are pure creativity. We're a wheel turning from its own center. We're not running their programs anymore.
Mm.
We're in our pure, able to purely be and to purely give our impact, which is what we're talking about today. So anyway, I love this Nietzsche thing, and it's one of the paradigms of evolution that soul evolution that I talk about. So thanks for listening.
And of course,
to that.
Christ talked about this because he said, leave your mother, leave your father.
Yeah. And he also said, if you want to be my disciple, then pick up your cross, which is all about dying to all these things we just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
As far as I'm concerned. And Paul, who promoted Jesus very well into the non-Jewish world, he talked about dying daily. And that's a lot of what we're talking about. Just, am I able to let go a little bit, go into the discomfort a little bit, change my identity a little bit? And from my perspective, we, back to the point of today, then we can see more clearly. We get a bigger flashlight. The more we allow these things, our flashlight gets bigger. We never see everything, but we get a bigger and bigger flashlight to see, where is my pot of gold? What's my unique impact?
Beautiful. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk about what it means to die a little more daily.
And thank you to our sponsor for making the show possible. Hooray!
Thank you so much for being with us today. We're discussing the goal and choosing your goal. And in regard to what our goal is, Wendy, you had mentioned dying a little bit daily. And I would like to discuss, what does that mean? Because you hear people talking about it, but how do I die daily? What do I die daily? I know my cells are shifting. I know cells are dying constantly and being replaced with new cells, but more globally, what does it mean to die daily?
Mm-hmm. I believe a lot of traditions, spiritual practices, religions over time have talked about this in different ways. Obviously I was speaking Christian there, but and I hope it's obvious that I'm talking about a soul or an ego death. I'm not talking about physical death. But the whole process for me of becoming who we are, becoming, being and doing and having the impact that we're here to have, for me is about letting go of all the things that aren't that, and all the me's that are not me, and all the things that they want me to be that aren't that, and all the potential things I could do that aren't that. So, you were saying earlier about being a mom. It's so hard. It's so hard. Every minute, it's just like, do I move this forward or do I serve my child? Like, I see a lot of that. Like, there's all this pressure of like, make sure the kid's okay, make sure the kid's taken care of, and like, you also have to do all these other things and move your own goals forward. And so that's a messy, messy process that requires a lot of letting go.
Yes. And choosing the right things to make important, right? Prioritizing. One thing you mentioned reminded me of the Marshmallow Experiment. Are you familiar with that? They sat kids in a room with an individual, and there was a marshmallow on a plate. And the person was talking about the marshmallow and describing, what it was. And then that person would leave the room. And before they left, they would say to the child, if you don't eat this marshmallow, we'll give you 2. So a kid sitting there in the room alone with a marshmallow, and was told, if they didn't eat it, they would get more. And some kids, would touch it, and some kids would eat it, and some kids wouldn't eat it. And what's interesting about the marshmallow experiment is that I think when you talk about dying to yourself, it has to do with the way in which you make choices. So the children who were able to delay the gratification of eating that marshmallow were found to be able to cope with life differently, right? They were able to delay their own self-gratification in order to accomplish things. And so they were able to study because, right, they would delay their desire to go outside and kick the ball and get their studying done first, right? So that's a different way of being. So when you say die daily, it's seeing what the choices are. Do I want to eat this piece of cheesecake today? Do I want to eat I ate one yesterday, and am I going to eat another one tomorrow?
Mm-hmm.
And so with this skill, with the marshmallow experiment, you see where independence can come in.
Yeah.
You can see where autonomy is important, and especially neutrality, because you have to get outside of the marshmallow to be able to make the decision whether you're going to eat it or not. Because if you're just sitting in the moment, that marshmallow looks so good. Why wouldn't you eat it right now?
Yes, why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't you?
So having the greater goal, 2 marshmallows in this case, the greater goal really helps
matter
us.
For some people. Yeah.
Yeah, it really helps us though. For those of us who have that muscle a little bit, like to be able to be just like, oh, I want this more than that. Mm-hmm. It really helps. It really helps. Mm-hmm. So how do you choose your goals, Dawn? How do you choose a big enough game for you to play?
That's a great question. It reminds me years and years ago when my oldest was a toddler. I may have told this story before. I had wanted to get up and go for a run. So I would put him in a stroller and go for a run, but he was cutting teeth. And so neither of us got good sleep. So my morning run, I chose not to do it in the morning and decided to do it in the afternoon. And then I got a call from a neighbor who said, I'm having shoulder trouble. Can you treat me today? So during the nap, I scheduled a person to treat them. And then the next day, and I didn't get the run in that day. And the next day, this woman said to me, how can I help you? And I was really upset that I didn't go running. And she said, well, how did not running serve you yesterday? And I was like, what? I didn't understand the question. What do you mean? How did it serve me? How did not running serve me? I know how running serves me, but how did not running? And what that question allowed me to see was that while my running was important, what was more important to me was being of service. So I would always be of service first before going on a run. And it was so important for me to see that, because it showed me my entire life and why I had made the choices that I had made. Why I worked at Cornell University, why I was a fencer, all these things that I had done, why I went to school and became licensed. And in every moment, I was able to see that I was putting a purpose first. And I didn't understand that purpose until she asked me that question. And my purpose was to be of service to others on their path, on their journey. So that's how I discovered mine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And is that still where you see yourself? Is
Yes.
that still your, and how does that
yes.
work out with your life and your work?
I'll mention people who are in pain don't feel that they're able to live fully and completely and live their purpose. So I resolve chronic and acute pain so that people can continue to live their purpose because they feel restricted by the pain, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what's fascinating is after years of doing pain work and helping people live pain-free, I realized that it wasn't enough for people to just be pain-free. They needed another step to live their purpose. And that next step was living by heart. So then I began teaching people after they were pain-free how to live by heart. And then they were able to pursue, they were able to choose their goal. They were able to see how they were making choices that led to the direction of their goal, even though they weren't aware of what their goal was, essentially. So this idea of living by heart helps people know that they're shining their light in the right way, in the right direction, and that they are living according to a purpose, even though they may not consciously be aware of it.
Oh, absolutely gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. Thank you so much. That's, yes, I hope everybody's really hearing that. It's gorgeous.
And I'd like to mention your business is Align on Purpose.
Mm-hmm. Very, very similar.
Talk about how you help people reach their goals with this idea of aligning with purpose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My purpose is very similar to yours. I put it in terms of teleos, which is a Greek word meaning coming to our full manifestation, realization, like the oak that's hidden in the acorn. And so how I do that with myself and others is that I equip people on the inside to make change. I believe all change happens here first. I believe being the change really is the way. I really believe it. And so as and I help other people do this, as I allow the shifts here deep inside me, then they very easily or naturally manifest or realize into my world, into my life and my body, my world. And so I help people be able to notice what's going on here and subtly around them. I help them to be with it and not resist and judge and fight. And, because what we run from chases us, and then from there to choose what's possible for them, to see with their light, to see what's possible from this reality, and to really have what it takes to the gumption, the power, the authority, the free will, etc., to be able to do that. So it's a very small, short way to talk about it, but helping people get equipped here to see and to act and to change.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And with that, I want to thank everyone for being here with us today. If this message spoke to you, please tell us what's on your heart by leaving us a comment. For more information about how you can live by heart, please go to livebyhearttoday.com. Like and follow this page and turn on notifications so you don't miss any shows. We air every Thursday at 4:44 Pacific time, and from our heart to yours, we're creating a better tomorrow as we live by heart today.
Join us every Thursday at 4:44 p.m. for another episode of
Live by Heart Today!
let's give a shout out to our sponsors. Thank you, We Are Storically, for making this show possible. Hooray!
Have a happy always.
For me, the thing that I care about is that you hear what's possible for you, that it's possible to change. It's possible to live the life that you want to be living. What I offer are inner tools to help make the changes that have been really hard to make, the impossible changes. You know how they say, just turn on a dime? Most people can't do that. Can't turn on a dime, but I have tools that can help. So please be in touch. I'd love to work with you one-on-one if you have something really deep, really gnarly that you want to handle. We can work one-on-one, or just sign up for my newsletter and you'll get a free workshop. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dawn Spiegelberg. I am a posture therapist specializing in post-physical therapy. This is all about alignment. I figured out and I now understand why there seem to be multiple things that I work on. So they might see me because they have a shoulder pain, but what they don't understand is that the shoulder pain is an indicator of a misalignment. The misalignment in the shoulder could be a physical misalignment in the actual shoulder tissue, in the shoulder joint and the musculature, which we take care of. But if they have still a mental misalignment, that there's some responsibility that they're not willing to take on that doesn't match with their values, or something that is a responsibility that they believe should exist and doesn't, that's a mismatch spiritually. Their shoulder won't actually get better until all of those things, body, mind, and spirit beliefs, are in alignment. Got it? So contact me today and let's change your perception. You do not have to live in the pain of a physical symptom, a mental symptom, or a belief symptom. Ooh, that's good. Because they say belief system. That was good, belief symptom.